So before we get Josh on the show, can you tell us and tell the viewers and listeners, what is Checkpoint Zoo about?
Yeah, Checkpoint Zoo is a different perspective on the war in Ukraine. It's completely from the point of view of the animals. So it centers around this zoo on the outskirts of the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, which is known as the Feldman Eco Park. And just to picture it on a map, this eco park is 18 miles from the Russian border. So when that invasion began in February of 2022, that zoo was right there, right in the line of fire, shooting, bombs going off everywhere. And so, I mean, what are they? There's the dilemma. Like, what do you flee? Do you bring your animals with you? I've just never seen a war documentary that focuses on the rescue and rehoming of animals. And this was something else. And Josh visited us on our podcast, and he even showed a tattoo that he got inspired by one of the film's animals. But we'll let him tell that story himself.
Josh, let's just get right into it, okay? We're just going to do that. Checkpoint Zoo. It covers two of my favorite things, Ukraine and animals. So I was very, very intrigued when I saw the trailer for this, and then when I saw the film. How much did you know about Ukraine itself, or even the war in Ukraine, before you started working on this?
It's interesting. My family is from Brest, so Poland, but I can't say I knew a lot, to be honest with you, at all. I think like many Americans, I came at the film from an American standpoint, from an English language standpoint, and I thought it would be interesting to introduce the film to American audiences and introduce the story of the war through an American voice or American eyes, per se. Also in a way to kind of engage Americans, because I felt that was very important. Like many people, Americans, the news that we were getting was that this was a watershed moment, not just in the world, in Europe. You know, the news that we were getting was this was comparable to World War II. So it was a huge moment. And like all filmmakers, journalists, we're always fascinated by the paradox of war. You know, it's something that's so destructive, yet we continue to do it all the time. So I was just looking for a way into this story, and I had done a previous film about animals, and just coming at the film from the standpoint of animals was just an interesting way in. That was the idea.
So how did Checkpoint Zoo, or the Eco Park Zoo, come into your orbit?
So I was looking for a story about animals and war, and I saw this story on the front page of the New York Times about a chimp named Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi had been, if you watch the film, Chi-Chi's in the film, Chi-Chi had been staying temporarily in the Kharkiv Zoo. This was about 5 months into the war, and she had been staying temporarily. And the article said that Chi-Chi had come from another zoo, Feldman Eco Park. And that zoo had been bombed terribly, and they had to evacuate the animals, and she was staying there temporarily, and she had escaped. And she was walking through the middle of Freedom Square, in the middle of Kharkiv. And as a filmmaker, you know, you just look for these moments, and that was it. That's the power of animals right there. Mm-hmm. And so I went on Google. I put in Feldman Eco Park. I got a telephone number. I called them. I said, hey, I would like to make a documentary. Does anybody there speak English? No, they don't speak any English, of course. I don't speak any Ukrainian. But one of the guys you see in the film, Vadim, he calls me back the next day, and he says, of course, we would love you to make a documentary about, you know. And he says, would you like me to send you a piece of footage that went viral, you know, from our evacuation? I was like, yes, please. And he sends me this footage of Timothy, who's one of the volunteers, driving a Sprinter van. And it's a selfie, you know, he's a video that he's shooting. And he says, I'm Timothy, I'm driving the Sprinter van. It's 2 months into the war. And he goes, and I have some passengers. We are evacuating. And he shows this van full of kangaroos.
The one that was on Kimmel that we see.
Yeah, it's one of those on Kimmel. I hadn't seen it. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. and I was just like so cute, and so I was like, if this is the movie, this is amazing. Well, I was like, oh, how much more could he have, right? And he's like, I have hundreds of more clips that went viral. Would you like me to show you? And I was just like, yes. And literally every night he would just send me footage that he and the volunteers had all shot of their evacuation. I didn't know a lot about the story. I knew a little from speaking to them, and I would just piece it together. And then I went over about 6 months into the war to start kind of filming.
That's one of the things that I noticed, of course, in the film is it is footage from the zoo. Like it is all the volunteers, and they're just, you cannot write these characters. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
So not just is it the animal stories, but when you saw the actual people in the footage, like tell me what you were thinking, and also the post process, because you have to translate everything. You have to organize it. So
when I had heard the story of this impossible mission, right? These volunteers and zookeepers who rescue 5,000 animals from a zoo that's kind of in between two armies. Okay, that's like an impossible mission story. I meet these people and they're the archetypal characters. It's unbelievable. There's the boss, who's like, looks like an oligarch but cries at the drop of a hat. There's the one female character who curses like a sailor, and then there's like the other big guy who has like the heart of gold, and the commander, and I got there and there's these cast of characters and they're all brilliant and they all lend something to the story. And so we just started filming and it was complicated. I don't speak Ukrainian, so we got a Ukrainian assistant editor. But here's the thing, they shot all these videos themselves. And by the way, when you watch the film, the first half, like the first 20 minutes before Timothy and his younger group join, there's no footage because the older people weren't shooting footage. But the minute these kids get in there, suddenly the film opens up and they're taking selfies of themselves all over the place.
Is that unusual to have a film that's 80% shot by others in a documentary, or do you rely on that process? And does that make your job easier or then harder, because then you didn't pick the settings and you didn't control what was being shot, so you're sifting through?
Oh, but that's the kind of the joy of it. Like that's the challenge that I love. Like I love kind of constructing a story from other people's footage. Like that's cool. That's really interesting, like a detective almost. And there's just you couldn't make those moments. You couldn't recreate somebody carrying a lion. You couldn't do that.
That was so wild. It's just wild to see what they're able to accomplish with like guessing, the guesswork.
So there's this Timothy, right? And he's got to it's really hard to evacuate a predator. So because the animals they've been starving, so they're weak. Yet they've also been like feeling these bombs going off all the time. So they're also really like amped up. So that's a deadly combination, because if you give them too much anesthesia and they're weak, you could kill them. But if you don't give them enough anesthesia, they'll overcome the anesthesia and eat you. So it was wicked hard, and they did not over anesthetize any animal. But what they did do was they actually under anesthetize all these animals. So a lot of times they would pull the lion or tiger out and he's like drunk. Like he's not really asleep, he's drunk. And so there's one guy who's always a fraidy cat, and they would be like, can you imagine carrying out a lion and the lion opens up its eye as you carrying him out to the van? It's completely terrifying. I couldn't believe the things that they were doing with these drunk animals.
It's such a combination of this being, you're in the midst of a horror and bombs dropping and people are dying. And then at the same time, you have, this younger generation taking selfies and playing jokes on each other and riffing. And it's so contradictory.
Well, Ukrainians, you guys know better than I do, but Ukrainians have a very gallows sense of humor, obviously. And in that situation, what else are you going to do? What else can you do? And so, but here's the thing. I think they felt somewhat impervious. And I felt it too, because when I went over there, I wasn't scared at all. And I realized what it is. It's when you're talking about animals, when you're talking about saving animals, and you're talking about doing this type of work, suddenly you become like energized, or like, it's like, I'm doing God's work. Nothing is going to happen to me. This is too important. This goes beyond war. This is like bigger. And so I got that sense. Like, that's why they were doing it. War is meant to strip away your humanity, but in saving these animals, these kids refound their humanity again. And these volunteers, they refound their humanity again, but even better. They were even better because they were doing this selfless work. When you work with animals, or you're saving animals, you just become, you become a better human being in general. You learn, animals make us better human beings.
When it comes to animals, it's almost like we have that boxed in a different part of our brain, or a different category of compassion. And we do treat it differently. Why do you think that is?
Animals don't care about borders. They don't care about NATO. They don't care about Russian Mir. They don't care about any of that stuff. They only care about survival, procreating, compassion and love. I guess love, if you want to call it unconditional love, if that's what it is. So they're innocent. They're pure innocent, theoretically. And here we are putting this human construct of war on top of them, and they didn't ask for it. They probably don't understand it. So they do get that special box.
So when you were deciding to actually go to Ukraine, tell me how you got your Ukrainian team together.
So I used to be an assistant director on some pretty big like stunt things. So I have a bit of experience kind of like managing some kind of complicated situations. I found a DP, guy by the name of Olivier Sarbel, who had directed another Ukrainian film called Victor that's making the rounds now. Olivier is a combat cinematographer. So he was in special forces before. So he knew what he was doing. It was just me and him who went over the first time.
Oh, interesting.
Like 2 lights, like the littlest kit, like just what we could carry, basically, when we went over. And when I went back a second time, it was myself and a DP. And then by that time, we had a crew of Ukrainian filmmakers, great filmmaking community there. I just flew into Warsaw, went across the border, and then to go all the way over to Kharkiv. Kharkiv is only 30 miles from the border. It is hot when you go over there. And
so you had a road trip to go on.
Yeah, I like the road trip.
Did you take the train? Did you take that awesome overnight train?
No, I didn't take the trains. We drove.
Okay.
I've taken the train since. I just went back to Ukraine to show the film in Kharkiv for the residents of Kharkiv about 4 weeks ago. That was a very emotional experience. But the first time I went over, we drove. And first of all, like, I love Ukrainian food. Like, I love Ukrainian food. Like, I'll say it like 5 times how much I like Ukrainian food. So I would just be like, can we stop there? Can we stop there? It was just so good. The first time, I think I spent like 3 days getting there, 4 days shooting, just interviews, and then went back. And then we assembled more footage and then went back again.
Do you then feel more confident or more scared because now, like, the reality?
When we went to Kharkiv, there's a great hotel at the Park Hotel. I loved it so much. I love this Park Hotel. I love the people there. And it was fun because you would go there and you thought you were very special, but then you would go there and be like, there's 2 other Brooklyn, documentary filmmakers there. And you're like, maybe I'm not so special. And so, but I loved it. It was just so great. And there was the second time staying there. And when I got home, they had bombed that hotel specifically, completely destroyed that hotel. That was the only time I was like, whoa. Because at some point I always felt like, oh, I'm American, don't kill me. It'll turn into some international incident. Yeah. Well, that's a very naive idea. And in fact, this Park Hotel didn't get destroyed. The people in it, thank God no one was killed, but like I knew all the people in it, felt horrible. And then I was like, oh, that motherfucker, Putin, is specifically targeting foreign journalists, so they can't tell stories about what's going on. And then I was like, and then I only got emboldened more.
Do you think it wouldn't have upset you if you hadn't gone there and worked on the project? Like, was that a learned being upset, or were you upset from the get-go before even setting foot?
No, I think it hit especially hard. If you want to really talk about people who are patriotic and loyal to democracy, you should be looking at these people. These people are willing to die, straight-faced die for democracy and for a choice. And so that was what was really pissing me off the most, is like, we profess to have all these patriotic ideas here about democracy. And it's like, these people do. They are fighting for it every single day, an idea, a freedom of choice. So it was also the hypocrisy of that. I learned what fighting for choice and for democracy and not to be under oppression really, really means. I mean, you wake up one day and suddenly there's literally tanks rolling through your neighborhood. You didn't ask for that, and the audacity of somebody to think that they can do that. So yeah, I learned quite a bit. And that made me a lot more incensed at what was going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it did, because I've spent my entire life being incensed. It was part of the Soviet Union. And then there was this 30-year period where Ukraine had independence. I'm a Canadian citizen. I'm an American citizen. I've got loyalty to 3 different countries. And it's it's like having 3 children, right? Like, Canada's fine. So I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing here in the US. But the perpetual child that you're constantly worrying about and constantly having this low-grade anxiety, since the day you were born, is Ukraine.
What we have to do is find new ways, additional ways to keep people engaged. That's the biggest problem at the moment. People, even Ukrainians, get tired of the war. Everybody gets tired of the war. And that's Putin's goal. It's a war of attrition. He's going to wear you down. And so I always thought, animals is a great way to get people to care. Animals is bipartisan. Everybody has animals, whether you're red or blue, doesn't matter. So I wanted to use the film to try and get people to care.
I know that Leonardo worked with you on a previous film.
Leo's great. I think he realizes the power that his celebrity brings. And if you have that power and you don't use it, you are not living up to your potential. Mm-hmm. So the fact that he does do that, commendable, 100%. So, he knew the film was about saving animals. And so he let his name and that allowed us to expand the reach of the film, for sure. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't quite be in the situation that we are. So hugely filled with great gratitude for that, because this allows us to tell the story. Even in Ukraine, people are like, oh, the couple, this is very good. So it was great. It was really good, very helpful.
I want to return to the actual film because last year, the Oscar-nominated or Oscar-winning short, or it wasn't even a short, the Oscar-winning animated film Flow, which I loved, all about the animals. I just fell in love with the capybara in that movie. And it was just, I'd never seen an animated character be a capybara. There's always all these other ones. So I just fell for that character. And in this one, it was the tapirs did it for me. I was like, I didn't know anything about them. Are they cows? Are they anteater? I am slightly obsessed now. And I need you to talk more about the tapirs and what made them so cinematic for your documentary.
Maybe get a tapir.
Stop.
Oh my gosh! See, you're just as affected by them too. Okay, let's talk tapirs. Tell me more about them and tell me about your experience with them. Now I'm so jealous. I want that.
It's cool. It's cool. I mean, they're just like these crazy little, it's like, is it a pig? Is it an elephant that's really small? Is it a hippopotamus? You have no idea. They're wicked cute.
That it was part of the ant eating family or something
Yes,
like that.
like a grunt, like a kind of cuter anteater, you know. And
I got very emotional watching, the monkeys hold each other, and then hearing about the thrashing, and then basically like unwillingly committing suicide because they're just so stressed, and that was heartbreaking. And then watching Mr. Feldman visit the chimp in a different
isn't that crazy?
location,
Isn't that
and
footage
then
nuts?
just it broke. Like, full confession, I had to put down my own beliefs and opinions about how I feel like about zoos,
Me too.
animals being held
Me
in
too.
captivity. That's a whole other thing. So I kind of had to put that aside because this story was about saving animals, and we weren't debating the ethics of that in and of itself. And
It's worthwhile to debate those ethics, by the way.
Yeah, totally. Do you want to debate?
I guess. Well, the relationship between Feldman and the chimp through the glass was very emotional, right? He's crying, devastated. I'm crying, right? It's like a three-way cry fest happening between me and the two characters in the film. But at the same time, like the chimp should never have even been there in the first place. Like, but
Absolutely.
I can't. But like, we're not talking about that, so I can't really I can't be like, oh hey, Feldman, former billionaire, wine collector, or everything. Like, how did you ethically acquire these animals?
Oh, right.
Right. Like, I mean, that's we're here to talk about like the trauma of war and how people save what they love. Clearly, he loves animals, but like that love is misplaced, right?
Absolutely.
But that doesn't.
He's like Schindler. He's like Schindler's List. That's what I always think of him like a guy who the ill-gotten animals that he had, but then he becomes fully responsible, and then but he's a billionaire. Like, that allowed him to get his menagerie of animals. Yet at the same time, he's gone poor, saving these animals, selling his wine collection, $1 million wine collection, sold it for $250,000. Probably sold it to another Russian oligarch.
Totally. Who bought like weapons to bomb Ukraine or whatever.
So, he's, I don't want to say comeuppance, but I'm saying that it's a very involved thing. And that's also why at the end, he can't he can't touch his animals. They're behind glass. Like, that's the lesson that he's got to learn, that just because you love an animal in the way that you love it doesn't mean you respect its sovereignty. So, and the same thing about people in Ukraine and sovereignty. And so there's all these kind of sub stories going around, and about, we put those out, those boys recognized that we put those animals in that zoo and then had to save them. That's another important beat where they realize, they come to the issue of, zoos, again, if we hadn't put these animals here, could we save them? Yet at the same time, as you brought up first in the conversation, Feldman keeps wanting to rebuild the zoo, which I'm not in favor of, or I wasn't in favor of. I was like, we're just rehoming these animals in not a good way. Like, let's not do that. Let's take the lessons that we learned to say, maybe we shouldn't. Yet, when I went there just recently, 4 weeks ago, he's rebuilt the zoo. And I got to tell you, the faces of the children seeing these animals when they don't have any other happiness because they're at school in shelters. Yeah. It's hard for me to reconcile those two things. So it's such an interesting dichotomy and juxtaposition. Yeah, it is. Obviously, we're not going to solve the crisis of zoos. However, I did truly learn the difference between, as I could break it down, it's the difference between zoos for entertainment and zoos for educational purposes. Mm-hmm. That's really the issues at hand. In fact, they had animals there, that support animals for previous veterans for 2014. Wow. And then, Vadim would always say, like, now our animals are going to need therapy, and it's true, but thank God animals are far more adaptive than humans so they're able to readapt a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So a lot of those animals were rehomed, and I think some of them went on to better places. To be honest with you, there was a lot of organizations that were mad at Feldman because he didn't want to hand over the animals.
Mm.
He didn't want them to leave Ukraine. He thought they were like Ukraine's animals. As you said, I think those issues are important, but at the end of the day, it really is, this kind of rescue mission.
You have to decide what the narrative of your film is, and you're not here to make a statement on ethics. This is a war movie.
Well,
it's a horror movie.
We should, to be responsible filmmakers, we should try and find a way to do both. If you
Well, it does elicit those conversations, though. I think, like, you may not have the time in your 2-hour window to open up that can and then go down that rabbit hole. But I do think, as an observer, I did have a lot of thoughts of like, where are they going to go?
Good.
Who's going to take them? They wouldn't have been in this position if they weren't stripped from their parents when they were babies, or all of that was going on through my head. But again, it was just like, we're talking about the war.
That's my goal. My goal as the filmmaker is to want you to ask those questions, not necessarily to answer them, but what's interesting is that the film was somewhat divisive to like zoos. They don't want it because zoos are like, no, we feel that the film has an anti-zoo message. I was like, okay, guys, well, guess what? You might want to address that in a kind of more open dialogue sort of way, rather than just like a head in the sand way. It's actually a film that brings that issue up, but does it in a kind of gentle way that allows people to have dialogue and conversation rather than, hatred about it. But then at the same time, the very strong animal conservation groups, they didn't like the film because they thought it sent, a positive zoo message. So it's tough for a filmmaker where you want to have a film that tries to go down the middle of the line and asks both sides to ask the questions.
Yeah.
But neither one wants to promote, which I find very frustrating and I think very closed-minded about, and kind of that's the atomization of our dialogue in this day and age where you can't have both. So it's tragic too that it happens, especially in the animal community, that there is no middle ground for dialogue.
But I also find that happens within communities anyways. Like during times of war, there's factions, right? I mean, maybe, I don't know if you saw factions around you forming of what to do and how to do it. But like, I think that does tend to form when people have ideas of how something should be done in a time of crisis, and then people can't agree on anything.
Yes, that's definitely true. That for sure, that's true. And of course, like what you were saying before, Americans love to tell other people what they should be doing. Ukrainians are like, why don't you not tell us what we should be doing right now? Just go watch bombing citizens in an effort to take out their heat. That's the insidiousness of it. It's not soldier to soldier. It's Putin taking out cultural institutions as a part of to strip away cultural institutions. And it's bombing the populace to take out the heat so that they basically get tired and can't do it anymore. And as you know, it gets cold in Ukraine. Yeah. And so, you're basically just trying to break the will of pensioners. There's a video of the guy smoking a cigarette as he's getting shot.
Yes.
He's like, Slava Ukraine, and I got to tell you, fucking badass. Like, that's why if you look at it from a political standpoint, this is the cheapest proxy war you could ever fight and beat Putin. Cheapest proxy war you could ever fight, because these fighters are tough and they will go to the end of it. And it's not like, 1,000 little guys. It's like some big guys, some real big tough guys. So if you want to look at it from a political standpoint, it's a cheap proxy war. If you want to look at it from like a straight emotional standpoint, these guys know democracy and they're fighting for the depths of democracy. And then they're smart, because Ukraine will emerge as a superpower. Why? Because they redefine war. Because if you go to, in Kharkiv and other places, Kharkiv had 4 colleges, and it was also very technological. It was also robotics. And you have all these smart kids, wicked smart kids, and they're like, oh, actually, I could put a GPS right on that drone. They have redefined the battlefield. the war, and now everybody's going to them to figure out how to do it.
There's a very emotional scene in the film with the German photographer.
Yep.
How do you, as the filmmaker, separate yourself? Because some of the stuff is just so hard. I find it hard to watch.
It is, first of all, if it didn't make me cry, I wouldn't put it in. To make somebody feel something, if you have that ability as a filmmaker, as an artist, you must take that chance. You must engage in that way. Whether people decide to see it or not, that's not the issue. The issue is whether you're putting it out there in an effort to show humanity or to make people care, because those are the moments. And so, if I didn't cry during the scene while watching it at a screening, I knew it wasn't working.
Yeah.
This actually now prompts a question for me that I wasn't even thinking of. So the war, watching that movie, I saw no visual enemy, right? It was the bombs. It was that there was no face to it. And then later on, we do come face to face with two captive Russian soldiers, and there's a confrontation between the civilians. It was jarring in a way because I was kind of in this lull of the animals and all of that stuff, and then like to have this enemy enter the fray at it was like, ooh, like what are they doing in this movie? Like, just like, why are they here? But then also my hatred toward them, and to watch them have to face those consequences was like, well, fuck yeah. And there's more of you that should too. But what was the impetus behind actually bringing the enemy's face into the film when the rest of the movie doesn't have any?
When the father confronts that soldier, it's the movie in a nutshell, because it's about innocence. So the person who dies is basically a representation of the innocence of the animals. And when the father confronts that and says, what am I supposed to do with you? I mean, it's one of the most powerful things I've ever seen. And if you can imagine that moment, what the two sides are going through in each person's brain. Andre had turned around and said to me later, he goes, I was going to kill that guy. I was going to kill that soldier. And nobody would have said a thing. I had a huge knife on me. And I was going to kill him. And I was planning on how to kill him right at that moment. And everybody would have been fine with it. And the father turned and said, no, I want to let you do it. Because if you do, we are just like them. And so, to me, that's what the movie's about. It's about the strength of rescuing animals versus fighting. It's about the strength of being, it's about the strength of compassion and empathy to overcome the other things. And so it's about realizing how strong those emotions are and how powerful they are, and that you're not weak if you have empathy and compassion.
Josh, thank you so much for this movie. It is a gift to all Ukrainians and a gift to the rest of the world. And it's also a gift to the animals, because no matter what war is happening, Ukraine or any other, there are always animals involved. And so thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. I have to thank Ukraine for allowing me, to tell the film. It's more my thank you than yours.